This is the Phoenix mind, where the fire refines, break the chains and rise to shine. Rise stronger, lead with heart, every end a brand new start. With Lisa Manzo, we transform, we ignite. This is the Phoenix mind.
Welcome to the Phoenix Mind Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Manzo, and today my special guest is Jerry Brazie, and hopefully I said that right. Jerry is a serial entrepreneur who went from surviving the streets of Portland to building and selling companies that generated over $450 million in revenue. With a no-nonsense approach shaped by brutal childhood and decades of business experience, Jerry now runs multiple companies and leads the Kronos Group, a mastermind for business owners who want real, practical insight, not theory. He's also the host of the Jerry Brazie Podcast, where he shares raw lessons on leadership, ownership, and resilience. Welcome, Jerry. Thank you for being here.
Lisa, I love it. Thank you very much. Thank you for the very nice intro there.
Oh, yeah, it's great. And I'm so interested. Wow, because, I'm working my way in the entrepreneurial world, and I aspire to be you with $450 million of revenue, and I will get there because it will happen because I see it. Anyway,
Yes.
So tell my audience a little of your story on why you do what you do, because it said you had a brutal childhood. Tell us a little more, because I want them to know you.
So I have 8 brothers and sisters, and my mother had 6 kids when she was 23 years old. And if you can think about it, she brought home my next oldest sister, a brand new infant, but at home she had a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-old, 6 children. So 6 children, 5 years and below. And we were abject poverty. I was not one of those 6 children. I didn't come along until 7 years later. And then they did not want me to be an only child, so I have a little brother and a little sister because they kind of knew that was going to be 2 families. My dad was in and out of the house all of the time, working, doing his best to try to make a living. My mother slept every other day for a decade, and she, 1 washing machine, 2, 3 kids in cloth diapers, no real help from the state this is, a long time ago. It's a different world we live in today than then. Very resourceful. And in all of those years, I never heard my mother complain one time. She's 87 years old, still alive today, still kicking, lives by herself. They live on their own. My parents do together. They've been together coming up on 70 years. And so my mother's never complained one time, and she'd go back and do it all over again if she could. And she says that all the time. So my strength and resiliency comes from watching my mother over all of those years. Now, again, abject poverty. I'm a child of the streets. High school through 15 years old, I lived with hookers and heroin addicts at 17 years old in a $25 a week flophouse. But I always had a job. So I got my first job at 11 years old. I paid taxes as an 11-year-old working at a local restaurant washing dishes on Saturday. And I've never not worked since, and I've never not paid taxes since. And so kind of watching my mother do what she did, and then at the same time watching my older brothers and sisters. And again, I've been shot and stabbed and beaten within an inch of my life. I've had all of these horrendous things happen to me. I've seen murders and suicides and just kind of what happens when you grow up on the streets like I did. And at the same time, though, I kind of had a perspective on life that kind of kept me close to the edge, but never fallen over into it. I never drank. I never smoked. I never smoked because I saw my brother smoke and it led to drinking. And I never drank because I watched my brothers drink and that led to smoke, or that led to drugs. And then, of course, obviously I never did do drugs. And so I was lucky enough to kind of, from the periphery, watch kind of what not to do. I spent my time in jail. I did all of those things as a young man, like so many people do where I come from. But my life was fashioned and shaped by watching my mother, and then going out in the world and, again, living on the streets the way that I did. I just tried to get up every day and go to work. And that at 11 years old, what kept me kind of, let's say, above the fray a little bit was that at 11 years old, they fed me at the end of the shift. And I stole food as a kid. I have a little brother that's 22 months younger than me. And he and I stole food as kids to eat because my older brothers and sisters would eat all of the food. My mother, if we sat around the table, would have to put food off to the side because there was so little of it, and she was doing her best to protect us. And so I kind of grew up in that Lord of the Flies, taking buses all over town as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, and really gained that kind of independence. But that meal I got at 11 years old, I would have worked all day for. They gave me a check, $2.35 an hour, and they paid me a check, $17.22. I remember very well. Went down to the local Century Market, cashed it for all ones, so I would have a roll like I saw on television, what the rich guys carried on TV. And that was my work day, but they gave me that sandwich. And so for me, food and work was inexorably linked. And so I always viewed food and work as the same thing. And so throughout my life, I've never been sick. I've never missed a day sick in my life at work as an example. I've been sick, but I just go to work because of that tie-in. And so as I was trying to get off the streets and as I was living the lifestyle that I always just went to work. So I'd see the hookers coming in from the night before. I'd be just leaving to go to work. And that was kind of, for whatever reason, that saved me, if you will, and gave me some advantages that maybe other people didn't, who grew up like I do, but fell down into some of the pits that kind of lifestyle will bring you.
That's so impressive that you had the insight to watch your older siblings and not follow that path of the didn't smoke, so you wouldn't drink. That's just amazing. What great insight at such a young age. And then your mother gave you the gift of being resourceful.
Yes.
That is absolutely this wonderful. Like our parents give us gifts. Like my dad gave me the gift of at 40, he went and he changed careers, right? So when I was 40, I changed careers and didn't like that one. So then I went at 50 and I changed again. And now I'm in 60 and I'm changing again. And it's just because I can. It was a gift from my childhood. And isn't that, it's such a beautiful thing that our parents can do that for us or our siblings.
Yeah, and if you were to ask my mother today, she would, she'll apologize for how hard we had it and how difficult things were and how tough she was because she was a real taskmaster. Old school, she was born in 1938. The woman knew how to give a beating and knew how to do all those things. But I always tell her, you gave me a beating. I'll tell you another lesson my mother taught me to help me get off the streets. She would give a beating like nobody else. And if my brother and I ever got caught doing anything, both of us took the beating. And so we learned to do arbitrage on the things that we were going to do wrong. If we were going to steal the paint canisters out of the neighbor's garage, we had to evaluate whether or not the beating we were going to get outweighed the value of the fun we were going to have with the paint cans. So as 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, again, who had this structure of knowing how to steal at the stores and how to feed ourselves and kind of, again, Lord of the Flies mentality. At the same time, we feared that woman. And so she taught me to evaluate risk at the earliest ages. And so I tell her all the time, maybe you caught me 1 time out of 10 and gave me a beating. So, I got away with it 9 times, but you probably saved me from really catastrophic things because we're like, man, if mom catches us, the beating's going to be pretty significant, and we didn't want to go anywhere near that. So she taught me a lot of lessons, even though to her, she, now at 87 years old, and you look at the world very differently, thought she was a lot meaner than she needed to be.
Yeah, I could see that because I think about when I was raising my kids, I could have been a little nicer.
Yeah.
Could have been a little nicer.
Right.
So how does all these skills that you've gotten from your childhood, the resilience, tie to business? Because it does. And I want to know. So
when I was 14 years old, I went to a U.S. bank. I had a U.S. bank card, and you and I'm 56 years old, so we're close to the same age. And at 50, when you're a kid and you get in the 70s, this is the early 80s, and you got something with your name on it, again, particularly when you're poor, it's a big deal. So I had a bank card. So I kept as much money in the bank as I could just so I could go take it out. And you had to leave $5 in the bank in those days. And I had $85 in the bank, and I took the $80 out, which to a 14-year-old Jerry is a whole lot of money. And again, I'm working for $2.50 an hour. And I take the money out of the bank, Southeast Portland, rough neighborhood, and I not paying attention like I know how to do because I'm a street kid, and 4 guys get me, and they put a beating to me pretty good. They take my money. They take everything I have except the most important thing, which was my life. They broke 2 ribs. They broke my nose. They rolled me underneath the bus stop completely passed out, left for dead. I wake up a couple hours later. This was in August in Portland, Oregon. I get on a bus. I go to a transfer point. I know how to take buses. I've been doing it since I was 5 years old on my own. And I pass out under a tree in a park, wake up. It's getting to be sunset. And I take another bus. And now I have a 2-mile walk home. And I go back to Portland. I have business in Portland. I live in Tennessee now. And I go back there every other month, give or take, for a week. And I will go to this square. There's an oversized square right before we go over the interstate freeway, right there on 60th, right off of Gleason Street. And I will go to it, and I will just stand on it, or I will drive by it and look at it, and it's still there. It's an oversized sidewalk. And because as I was walking home, both eyes are black. I got blood down my front. My nose is broken, and it's separated on the top. The ribs are all messed up. A voice. I thought that the duplex next to me, somebody opened their window and was yelling at me, which would be par for the course. Now, I want to back up and say that when I was 13, just a few months before, my older sister died on her 21st birthday. Ooh. So I dealt with that. And 4 months later, just a few months before this story I'm telling you, I went blind in my right eye out of nowhere. I got a virus, and they barely were able to stop it out of my left eye. So I'm wearing glasses, and all of these things had just happened to me in 7-8 months. And now I take this beating. They take all the money I have. And as I'm walking by, I believe out of the window of this duplex, a voice behind me, female, says to me loudly outside my head, "Everything is your fault. Whatever you do going forward, it's all on you." I turned. This is a true story. I've told the story 1,000 times on my children's eyes. I turned thinking someone's yelling at me out of the duplex. But again, it wasn't. I don't know if it was God, if it was Jiminy Cricket, if it was my conscience, if it was the fact that I was beaten within an inch of my life into a pulp. But it said clearly, "Everything's your fault." I argued back, and I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "If you don't change, you're going to be like everybody else." Now, I went home, and in the end, I have a little nubbin on my nose. I held my nose shut for 3 days and until it quit opening. That's what we called going to the hospital, and pretty soon it quit opening after the 3rd day, and now I have a little nubbin up there. The ribs still bother me all these years later, but that stuck with me. It did not hockey stick me. I didn't immediately change, but it was in my head. And so how does that equate to business? Go forward I'm 28 years old. I've been, I got robbed and stabbed with a 10-inch screwdriver, and that's a whole nother story. And I've been, in 100 fights, and I lived through this life, but I'm always going to work, always going to work. At 28 years old, I have another epiphany. A group had approached me about starting a business. I was running a business for somebody else. I had done it very well. And a group approached me and said, "We want you to do what you're doing here, only we're going to put you in charge, and we'll give you some equity. We'll give you a piece of the game." I didn't know what equity was. I didn't know what the financials they sent me were. I knew how to run operations, but I didn't know what I had. This one was not quite so dramatic. It was just a simple voice in my head that said, "Shut up and listen. If you don't change what you're doing now, you're going to be doing the same thing when you're 50 years old." Simple. And I sat there in this office staring at these financial documents that I had no idea what I was looking at. And I made that decision. Now, my son had just been born. My first son changed my life. 180 degrees. It supercharged whatever competition I felt, whatever need to grow out of where I came from and change the world that I was in. It was on steroids when my son was born. I mean, the second my son was born. And so I had all of these forces on me, and I looked at it and I said, "I'm going to do that." And so I got rid of all of my friends. I stopped hanging out at the bar. I stopped playing sports, watching sports, talking sports while playing and watching sports at the bar, the way that so many men do. And I went and found uncomfortably people who were smarter than me, accountants and attorneys, and asked a bunch of dumb questions and just sat back and listened. And so when I got the advantage, or when I had the opportunity to front this company for these people who were willing to finance it, I jumped at it having no idea what it was. And that was kind of the whole coalescing of my childhood all the way up until that 28-year-old and that epiphany that hit me. And then I went and started that first business, which failed the first year. I came back 17. They came in and fired me because they didn't have the money that they said they did. I did what I was supposed to, which was $3.5 million in sales the first year. The average size of the average business in the United States, small business, is about $600,000. My company did $3.5 million the first year. I didn't know that was a big deal. I had no concept that that was reality. And they came in and fired me because it cost money to run a business that size. And 17 days later, I just went and took all the lessons I learned and started my own. And that company went on to do $300 million in revenue on its own.
Wow, that's so great that you could take the lessons that were given to you and say, hey, I'm not the smartest one in the room. Let me go figure this out and learn from somebody who's smarter than me.
Yes. And to that, not the smartest one in the room, I bought a house at 20 years old. Again, I always had a job, so I always had revenue, had income. I bought a house at 20 years old because I read an article about buying a house and what it meant to your future. And to me, as a kid from the street buying it, I'd never lived in a house that my parents owned. And so I said, well, that's something I've got to do. And so I didn't know what a mortgage was when I bought it at 20. I didn't know what equity was. I didn't know what an interest rate was. I'd never heard of those things. So when we talk about somebody without the skills or the know-how or the education to go and do the things that I did, I learned on the fly, but I was willing to because I was unencumbered by where I came from. I was unencumbered with a victim mentality that so many people around me had. I just didn't have that. I refused to give into that, and I was steadfastly looking forward. And so at 28, that was kind of, again, everything coalesced. All of those lessons and all of those experiences coalesced, and off I went.
I know. Well, it was never modeled for you being a victim. Your mother wasn't a victim.
That's right.
She was not a victim. She was resourceful. She used what she had. She didn't play. She never acted like a victim. So you never even encountered that. So that wouldn't even entered your mind.
1,000%. That's right. And so I have no concept of that. Right? People say, "How did you avoid it?" Which is the point here talking on this podcast. And for me, it was nothing that ever came up. I don't know that I was aware of it outside of that's how those people act, so I'm not going to. When you're born into institutional poverty, the way that I was, structured institutional poverty, it's very hard to escape that. And because everyone around you has it just like you do, and they don't want you to go, family, community, friends, because if you go, the neighborhood loses their excuse for why they couldn't do what you did. Because we all have an excuse when we come from that background that says some back east banker is responsible for the nightmare in my life. Some local cop is responsible for it, right? And for me, it was never like that because I listened to everybody around me, and that was always their excuse, the same. And I was like, I don't know what you people are talking about. That's a dead end. That epiphany at 14, by the time I was 18 or 19 or 20, I started to see it in action, what my voice had told me.
That's so interesting. It's like the story with the crabs in the bucket. One's trying to get out and the rest of them are pulling the other crab right back down.
Yes.
And you were able to get out because that's the only way.
Yes, that's right.
It's really sad because, people don't come with you.
No.
You have to let them go. That was a tough lesson for me, that I was going to have to let all these people that were in my house, in my life for so long, because they weren't helping me. I wasn't moving forward because they were doing the same things over and over. And I'm like, okay, it's time for something new. So I got to let all these people go. And it's interesting that you understood that. If
your trauma is holding you back and you surround yourself with other people who have the same approach to that trauma, then no one goes anywhere because you commiserate. And so you have to surround yourself with people who aren't affected by that. I had to get over the fact that most people don't grow up like that. Most people have, just normal lives, and that my experiences were abnormal. And in that they were so abnormal that it almost rendered it mute or useless against me. I just behaved like I saw the people around me who were where I wanted to be, and I kind of mimicked that. I kind of followed along in those footsteps, like my mother.
Do you have gratitude, and did you always have gratitude along the way?
Yeah, I think I think that I'm humble. Look, you have to have an ego to do what I do and to have done what I've done. And you have to have a big ego, but that's not a negative. A small ego for me in my world off the streets, a small ego is the kid that will get himself to make rash decisions and get himself in trouble over the smallest things because his feelings get hurt. In a big ego, I have no feelings. As a business owner, I say all the time, man, a good owner, a good manager is somebody that gets his people to do for him what he wants them to do and let him think it's their idea. right? So you don't need the, hey, look at me. You don't need to be patted on the back. When you're an entrepreneur, it's a very lonely endeavor. And in particular, when times are hard. And so if you need that pat on the back, you're going to have a very difficult time, and you're not going to be a great boss. And so in that context, I kept my humility. And I think that from that perspective, I don't know that I would call it I'm grateful necessarily. I would say that it's more a humility that keeps me grounded.
Oh, that's great. I was like, so do you have a lot of people working for you?
Yeah, I've had 10,000 employees over the last 30 odd years, 25 to 30 odd years. So at any one time, it's been hundreds, and I've got about 45 working for me now.
So one time when I was working in this restaurant, I was a server, and I was waiting on one of the manager's parents, right? And the parents would tell me, "Oh, the bosses love him," and this and that. And at the end of the conversation, I said, "Well, you really should ask the people that work for him, not the people who he works for, if you really want to know how your son's doing."
Yeah, it's true.
And they looked at me. They never asked me.
Yeah.
He was an okay boss. No, I don't even I don't have any memories either way. He was okay. But if you really want to know how you're doing, you're going to ask the people under them than the people in front of them.
Well, there's another precept that I teach to entrepreneurs, which is there's no emotion. You can be emotional about your work, but there's no emotion in business decision making, meaning you got to change today what you changed yesterday and be willing to change tomorrow what you changed today. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And in order to do that, you have to be able to self-assess. And so the lesson I taught myself at 14 years old, beaten in the ground, part of that came out of that was a self-assessment, an unflinching, tell me where I'm wrong, explain it to me like I'm an idiot, put a crayon in your hand and write it on a white piece of paper, tell me I'm wrong so I can learn, because I didn't know what an interest rate was. So if I'm not willing to shut up and listen and learn, back to my 28-year-old epiphany that said, shut up and listen. I learned so much from that epiphany because I got out of my own way. That means I want feedback, and I want brutal feedback, but that means I'm also going to give brutal feedback, and we can't have any emotions in here. We can have a conversation, but if you get butthurt over every conversation we have, we're not going to get anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. That was a hard lesson for me to learn, and I did learn it, and I'm grateful for the lesson because that's the only way to be in business. This is purely a business decision. This isn't working. What are we going to do to fix it? How can we shift it? Is it me? Is it you? What do we need to do?
Right. That's right.
And it was such a powerful lesson for me. It was like, okay, it's not about my ego. It's about moving the business forward. And I got to put my feelings over on the shelf and just figure out what's going to work best for the business. It was a great lesson, and I use it every day now. I'm like, okay, when I start to feel emotions coming up, okay, got to go put those emotions on the shelf because they're not serving you here.
That's right. Yep. Exactly right.
Yeah, it's been such a great journey over the last 6 years, because prior to this journey that I was on, I was just very unhappy, and now I have such joy in my life because I never understood enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Right? Not that life is not a destination, it's a journey. And
yes.
I got that clarity about 5 years ago. And do you think you always had that clarity about life being a journey and not a destination?
I'm driven. And so I'm not, in fact, as an example, I'm not one of these going to retire people. I'm not one of these guys that needs self-love and home work balance and all of these, what I consider to be crutches relative to what it takes to really succeed in the world. And when I say success, I don't just mean monetary success. I've been together with my wife for 33 years. We have 3 fantastic kids that are all in their 20s. I have broken the what would I call it? Kind of broken free of the chains that I had as a poor kid growing up on the streets, and have been able to get where I have gotten because of that drive. And so it's kind of inherent in me to just continue to push, and that's kind of what makes me happy. So really the journey in that context is just the competition. I'm not overly crazy about I'm not throwing chairs at sporting events or anything like that, but just I want my kids to do better than I did. I want them having better lives than I did. I want to provide for my wife the best that I can, right? I want to give the people around me the best things that I can, and I want to do better for myself while still remembering where I come from. So that drives me.
It's a great driving force. I love it. So looking back at your story, what's something that you're most proud of at this point?
My kids, all three of my kids graduated. The day my son was born, I say to everybody, go have children. What's the best advice I can give you as a business owner in particular with my background is to you young guys, go have children. Children will show you the world in a way that you can't imagine. I lived until I was 28 years old through the life that I have briefly explained to you here today. And when my son was born, it gave me a purpose. You're inherently selfish when you don't have children. I don't mean that as a pejorative. I just mean you're living for yourself. When you're given something else to live for, the way that I was the second my son was born, I saw the world through a completely different set of eyes. And I went on to have a daughter and then another son. And I see, as the more of them that were born, the more reinforced that was. So the greatest gift that I ever gave myself, the best advice I ever got, the biggest event in my life easily was that my children were born. And I had a very simple goal, and that was that they would graduate from high school, because where I came from, that didn't happen a lot. And I'm proud to say that I sent them to Chinese immersion school when they were 3 years old. So from 3 years old to fifth grade, they went to Chinese immersion school. That means they read, write, and speak Chinese fluently, just because I thought it was cool. And then I sent them to Catholic school from 6th through 8th grade because I wanted them to have an education. Then I sent them to Christian school for high school, and they've gone in the military and all sorts of other things since then. But graduated from high school was an afterthought almost. But to me, of all the things I've ever done, my children are by far the thing I'm most proud of. But the specific thing is they graduated from high school, because for somebody like me, that's a huge, huge event.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Jerry, I got two more questions for you. So how can somebody get in touch with you when they want to learn more from you?
You could go, I just started a new company, and you could reach out to me there, thekronosgroup.com, kronosgroup.org. Sorry about that, thekronosgroup.org. That's my new peer-to-peer group for masterminds. This is for business owners and that sort of thing. But they can reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anybody, or go to jerrybrazie.com or search for Jerry Brazie anywhere on the internet. jerrybrazie.com will get you where you want to. And here's what I want to say about that. I love conversations. This is not a sale. I love conversations. And if my story has helped you and you're struggling or you're having issues or you're like this, I'll get some really interesting feedback when I do this. And so I love that. I'm happy to have those conversations with anybody about anything, because I like giving back more than anything. If I can give you perspective and it somehow helps your life, all the more. If I get to learn a lesson from you, which I'm very open to doing through your story, then I come away a better man for it. So please, I'm happy to have conversations. Just DM me however you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. Thanks. And so a tool that you used when you were going through a difficult time that helped you keep you going, what do you have for my audience? Something that they can use or do if they're struggling?
I never forget where I come from. And so I have perspective, and I keep on my phone, I have a picture, and it's a picture of a kid in Africa that's emaciated. He's about 9 or 10 years old, and he is slumped down in the ground in a grass field, and behind him is a vulture waiting for him to die. The guy who took the picture, it's a picture from the 90s, if my memory serves, got on an airplane, flew away, ultimately ended up killing himself. He was asked the question, what happened to the kid? He said, I didn't know I had a plane to catch. The kid was 400 yards away from an aid station, but he's got a vulture sitting behind him, waiting to eat him, waiting for him to die, eyes wide open, but going completely emaciated. Whenever, I've had that picture on my phone for 20 years, whenever I think life is hard, I think back to my childhood and go, relative to my childhood, life is easy. Whenever I think life is hard and the childhood isn't cutting it, I go back to that picture. And I go, compared to that kid, man, life couldn't be better. Because the reality is today we live, you're 60 years old, I'm 56. The world today, poor people have what rich people had when I was a kid. Right? The world is completely different. We have so many things today that are unimaginable to people just 30 or 40 years ago. So we all have things to be to be grateful for, and perspective is an absolute critical piece to that. So my answer to your question is perspective, because I don't forget my childhood and I don't forget the suffering of others in other parts of the world.
Oh, Jerry, it's been great having you as a guest today. Thank you for your time and for being here.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. And I'm Lisa Manzo, your host of the Phoenix Mind Podcast, and I'll see you on the next episode.
This is the Phoenix Mind, where the fire refines. Together we rise, transform our lives. So subscribe